My name's James Dixon. I'm the head of sustainability at Newcastle Hospitals, and I'm here to tell you about how we got to declare a climate emergency, a little bit more background about our journey before then. It'll be about 20 minutes. We might just finish before 2 o'clock, and I don't know how we're going to do any Q&A, but we'll try and get by anyway. So here's a slide to tell us a little bit more about us. So you know about Newcastle Hospitals. So we're based all the way up there in the northeast of England. You can see on that map there at the top, we are from north of the wall, to use a Game of Thrones term, Hadrian's Wall. So we are the wildlands beyond the border there. We've had a long history of clinical excellence. That gives you some indicators as to how big we are, the kind of patients we see, the amount of turnover, and recently awarded outstanding for the second year running. So very proud of what we do clinically up here. And then from my point of view, me and the team, very proud of the history of sustainability work that we've done up until now. So I joined the trust in 2010 as the waste manager. I'd been working for the council before that, doing environmental stuff. And they'd done some great things before I'd even arrived. So on the left-hand side, you can see that's about the sexiest photo you'll see of a CHP energy centre. So that's combined heat and power. So we generate our own electricity on both of our hospital sites and use the waste heat from that process to actually heat our hot water for our space heating and our showers and our hot water. And that was about the late 90s, so early adopters of that technology. And then on the left-hand side, you can hopefully see the Sharp Smart boxes that we've got, which are reusable Sharps boxes. We brought them in 2004. I think we were the first trust in Europe to bring them in, and that's got a 90% reduction on carbon emissions associated with the Sharps disposal, because you're not burning those disposable boxes every time. So that's the kind of stuff we were doing before I got here. I arrived and it was a bit of a blank canvas from a waste and recycling point of view. So I was able to get a load of good things done. Set up contracts, so sending zero waste to landfill. Recycling rates increased massively. And as I was doing that, I was saving a lot more money, getting a bit of a reputation from the finance director as, people who can, deliver projects, which is all positive. And also in my spare time, kind of started establishing the sustainability strategy for the trust, the governance arrangements, setting up a way of reporting our progress and an action plan, much like the sustainable development unit at the centre recommend you do. And so that was, like I say, in my spare time, and we've gathered up a good cohort of people that were working on procurement, clinical areas, finance, HR, as well as your traditional estates people. Meanwhile, I was getting a bit frustrated that we didn't have enough resource to really concentrate to it. Bearing in mind I was doing this in my spare time. So managed to convince the trust to put a bit more resource into it. So I moved into a more senior head of department role and recruited a replacement waste manager and an energy manager, and then 2 sustainability officers that you can see in the bottom corner there. And then we were able to really put a bit more effort into it. We started implementing projects that were winning awards around sustainable food. We electrified our fleet. We purchased 100% renewable electricity on top of the electricity that we already produce on site ourselves in the CHP centres. We've got Warpit that you guys might have as well. It's a furniture and equipment reuse program, kind of like an eBay for unwanted resources. And we established a brand, which I'll come on to, Shine Sustainable Healthcare in Newcastle. And more recently, you'll just see Kathy Lawson, one of our anaesthetists there on the right-hand side. She was the first in the UK environmentally sustainable anaesthesia fellowship. So 50% clinical work, but also 50% on national programs to try and reduce the environmental impact of anaesthesia, which accounts for 5% of an acute hospital's carbon footprint. So it's very important work there in that field. The graph on the bottom right there is to do with our healthcare waste segregation. Complex healthcare waste, I'm sure you know, lots of different categories to cover, but we summarize it in the green is the recycling and reuse targets that we've got down there, and the columns on the far side is where we want to be by the end of 2020-21. We've already managed to achieve a reduction of the stuff we send away for incineration down to 18%. Our original target was 20, but you can see we've still got a bit of work to do to increase our recycling and reuse. And most of that we're concentrating on is the food waste recycling. So we're already doing some packaged food waste, but what about the plate scrapings and other food waste in the wards and departments? That's good opportunity going forward. So this is a little bit more about our brand that I touched on there, Shine, Sustainable Healthcare Newcastle. And this covers the breadth of the work that we cover as a department and as a trust. So our strategy covers the estates-related carbon reduction methods, as well as the travel that we have associated with our services. So it's patient and visitor travel, staff travel, the travel associated with the goods and services that we buy, and that's all focused in the journey section. Purchasing, those of you that know about carbon footprint in the NHS, it's between 60 and 70% of our carbon footprint. It's everything we buy has embodied carbon in it. So pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, everything, paper, plastic bottles for vendor machines, you name it. They've all got embodied carbon, and we have opportunities to influence that spend. Clinically, we can have certain interventions. Inhalers is a good example. If we move from propellant inhalers for patients with breathing difficulties and respiratory problems to a dry powdered inhaler, massive environmental improvement in shifting away from that. And there's new guidance from NICE that helps to point the right direction for those decisions. Care is a big important project for us, working with our clinical colleagues to develop low carbon care pathways, and also adapting our services with climate change in mind. So as we'll see, more extreme weather events, food shortages, climate migrants, vector-borne diseases, these are going to be impacts on our services in the future. And as an anchor institute, we're going to have to be ready for those challenges. And then people, it's just about doing like what I'm doing now, engagement work, training staff so they understand and make the right decisions and why it's a trust priority, and then working with a wider system to try and adopt those things and really upscale the efforts. On the left hand side, you'll see our annual report. We'll call it our Shine report. We've been doing standalone sustainability reports for a few years now because we didn't have enough pages in the trust's annual accounts, and it's a contractual requirement of NHS providers to reduce their environmental impact. It's standard clause 18 in the provider contract. Reduce the environmental impact where possible, manage and have an action plan to reduce that environmental impact, and report on it every year. So that's how we do it. And the bottom left is our Twitter account. So crazy as it is, we weren't allowed to have a Twitter account or anybody else other than the trust one a few years ago. We were quite closed with our social media presence. So finally that got lifted and we can actually share with people the work that we're doing. So moving on to what is a climate emergency. So it's very closely linked with the rise in awareness about the need to tackle the climate crisis and how it is a population health crisis. So the climate emergency is a health emergency, and it's linked to XR demands of telling the truth, act now, and the Citizens Assembly to actually deliver on it. So these three pieces that I interpreted to board were make a public acknowledgement that this is a health priority, and then the second one to act on it is to actually fast track our carbon emissions. So not just go with what the UK government targets of 100% reduction by 2050, to actually bring that forward. And it was very difficult, XR are demanding it by 2025, for us to map it to big, acute healthcare hospital 24/7, massively reliant on carbon to heat, in particular, our hospitals. We are locked into some CHP contracts, etc., etc. So we've mapped our opportunities to 2040. Now that's still a bit of a stretch target, but there it is. Act now, commit on fast tracking the reductions as best you can. Each organisation will be different, just depending on what your energy makeup and your carbon footprint is. And then the last bit, linked to Citizens Assembly, how we thought we could do that is work closely with our civic partners. So Newcastle Council declared in April, Newcastle University declared a few weeks after, and they were only the second university to declare behind Bristol. And we wanted, this was a civic priority for the city of Newcastle, so we should commit to that and be a good civic partner as well. So we are aligned with those guys to deliver a zero carbon Newcastle. Then my personal climate emergency journey started. So I am an environmental sustainability professional, have been since I graduated. So I'm well aware of the science and trying to get people to make the change to get us there. However, the IPCC report coming out last year, about this time last year, showed that the trajectory we're currently on is worse than we thought. So, a 50-50 chance of getting to the 1.5 degree threshold of the Paris Agreement cited is currently where we're at. And that is a flip of a coin about how we are going to survive as a species. So very, very worried about that. And we need to do even more. So there's an element of guilt in me as a professional environmental sustainability manager trying to drive carbon reductions and efforts. And we haven't done enough. So that's me as a woman. The picture there is trying to represent my eco-anxiety. So it really came to a fore when the IPCC report was there. Extinction Rebellion were bringing up their wave of awareness, and Greta Thunberg was doing her thing. And before that, Blue Planet 2 and the David Attenborough climate change facts section, public awareness is definitely there. And with it came guilt that I need to do absolutely as much as I can. Now, at the time at work, I was managing other teams as well as this team. And that just to me was not as important. This is the biggest crisis of our time, so I need to concentrate more efforts. So was honest with my director that I needed more time on this. Thankfully, he was receptive to it. I said I wanted to approach the board formally with top level support, because most of the stuff I touched on there was really bottom up. We'd recruited green champions, 300 green champions, and they were doing excellent stuff. The team was doing great stuff, but some of the embedding carbon reduction and sustainability at the top level in everything we do just wasn't quite there. So I knew we needed to make a push for that. Then he agreed that I could put a one-page proposal to execs with us to possibly declare a climate emergency. Then a roller coaster started, so that's why that picture's up there. So very positively, well received. Some questions in some quarters about whether we could afford it, whether we could actually deliver on 2040. Can we have more detail? So that goes, I've got to go through more detail. Are we going to get this thing? It was very much, we need to take a risk. It is a priority. We should just do it. So lots of up and downs, and it culminated in the last exec paper with a bit more information about how we could do it, and that was presented. And to get that over the line and approved, it needed to be approved by the exec team on that day if it was going to make the board meeting the following week. And then our board only meets every 2 months, so it felt like the opportunity was slipping away if we didn't get there. So I'm very nervous. What more can I do? I've written a great paper. I thought about convincing the argument, but it just a few people were feeling that it was a bit of a niggly doubt about whether we would. I'd been reading Greta Thunberg's small book, which is a collection of all of her speeches, inspirational speeches, to the kids. And I thought, I know, Dame Jackie, our CEO, loves a book. Brilliant example of servant leadership, empowering staff, doing the right things for our community. So I thought, I'll buy another copy of the book on my way home, call in a favour with the missus to take the kids to school, bike in really early. It was peeing down, it was horrible. Got there, managed to get to her office, see her PA. I didn't want to see her and risk it, and had a little note with the book and said, Ali, you've got to give this to Dame Jackie before the exec team meeting. I'll be forever grateful. And I just put a little note in there to say, this inspirational 16-year-old's up for a Nobel Peace Prize. She's spoken at the World Economic Forum. And I know you love a good quote. If you want to check page 20. And it was a quote on Cathedral Thinking, which I've got the full quote later on. But it was, you have to be brave and go for it. So I left that, and that was my last-ditch hope that she might take it. Bit worried that it was going to be seen as bribery, if I'm honest, but that I thought it was the right thing to do. And thankfully, I got a lovely email off her later on that day saying, thank you so much for the book, and we approved it. So that was great, but I thought, we've still got to get past the board, are people going to buy into this? So it was a bit nervous. And then, unbeknownst to me, most of the decisions were done. If the execs are in agreement with it, then, it's 90% done, for argument's sake. So then Channel 4 News got wind of us potentially declaring. They came to film the day before the board meeting. Lots of stress, going around all day, interviewing with various people. Great little piece if you haven't already seen it. And that was done the day before. And you can see on that image there, our Professor Sir John Byrne is our chairman. He's talking to Victoria MacDonald in the top left image of the 4. And off camera before we started filming, she said, "Oh, is there a chance that this isn't going to be approved?" And there's me thinking, in the background, I've got to prepare a presentation this night, take it to board, and really be the best presentation of my life. And he said, "Oh, no, no. Oh, it's definitely approved. I've taken shares action, spoken to all the non-exec directors. We're in agreement. It's the right thing to do." And I'm in the background. I'm just like, yes, I don't need to spend all night doing this amazing presentation. So that was a weight off my shoulders. And then you can see me presenting there, and that's Dame Jackie tweeting about how we've decided to go for it. So that was fantastic outcome from my point of view. Some of the reasons people always ask us about why we declared, "Oh, James, that's great. How can we do it?" So what worked for us, and you guys might be slightly different, is it's a health priority. So the Lancet have been saying it for long enough. Climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. On top of that being a health priority, the science was saying that we urgently need to do action. So that 50-50 chance that I talked about, we need to get off that trajectory, and we need to decarbonize as quick as possible. So science is telling us we have to do something. First, do no harm. That's our Hippocratic oath as healthcare professionals. That's what we're here to do. So why should we also be polluting our locality, our globe, and bringing more people ill health and through the door? So that resonated, that we've got to do as much as we can to reduce that ill health caused by our activities. And then I've touched on it already, Extinction Rebellion in the bottom corner, Greta Thunberg. There was a wave of public awareness about this becoming a priority. None of this discussions with climate change deniers anymore about trying to justify the position. Everyone's aware that it is there. People are seeing extreme weather events more and food shortages. And the last bit was about the collaboration in the locality. So the council declared, the university declared, we should be a good civic partner and join them. So this is how we might achieve carbon neutrality. This is what I'd put forward to the board to give them a bit of assurance as to how we might get there by 2040. They had a bit of assurance in that me and the team had been doing great things up until now. So it's not they're going to commit to this and then suddenly how the hell are they going to deliver it? So they had a bit of assurance there. They wanted to know how we could do what milestones. So this is the red line at the top, if you can see. That's our business as usual. We're selling some buildings and sites, but we're building more. So that's a little dip and then a rise. The yellow line is a token 3% demand reduction year on year, plus a bit of renewables. That'll get us to where we want to be. And then the next drop is when our CHP contracts, which I touched on at the very beginning, our combined heat power plants, they come out of PFI contract in 2027. When that happens, we could choose to turn off those assets that we'll then own, completely turn them off and import from grid. And because the grid's been decarbonized and it's projected to be further decarbonized, that's the impact. That's a steep drop there by 2028, 2029. And that's just by doing that. Now that comes with risks of cost. Hopefully the government will start to incentivize renewables, so it won't be as costly, but at the minute it's going to cost us to do that. And the resilience angle of we have our own on-site generation. If we have brownouts from the grid outside of that, we can still generate electricity. If we fully relied on the grid and there was brownouts, the hospital will be exposed. So you need to weigh up those decisions. But all things going well, we could turn it off and drop to that. And then the next biggest challenge is scenario 3, and that is how we decarbonize our heat requirement in acute healthcare and the UK for that matter. We're heavily reliant on fossil fuels for our heat. Used to be coal, we've transitioned more now to gas, which is cleaner, but it's still a fossil fuel. If we can get hydrogen through the gas networks, which there are some projects that the government's funded, particularly in the north, out of Leeds, and then through the rest of the northern gas networks, that could, if the electrolysis was 100% renewables and we managed carbon capture and storage, lots of ifs and buts, but by 2035 that could happen, and that would be the impact on the graph that you can see there. And then, to be honest, the last bit is we don't know. You just got to be honest that those last 5,000 tons, might we net it off with some local investment in trees or renewables off-site? Not sure, but hopefully by that point in time there'll be enough innovation and help from government that we'll be able to get there. So the last slide is really how we are going to achieve that on the next steps. It's collaboration. So locally, we're doing a lot of stuff with our university partners and our councils. Wider region ICS, I was meeting with our integrated care system yesterday, very keen on doing some, ICS wide action on climate change and climate emergency. And then nationally, I've spoken at some forums, and we work with the SDU to try and upscale this work and fast track. And then internationally, we're part of the Healthcare Without Harm we're a member of the Healthcare Without Harm and the Global Green and Healthy Hospitals, and we collaborate with them, and we can learn a lot from other parts of the world. So particularly on the continent in terms of energy, you know, with geothermal and ground source heat pumps, we're saying 2040 to be carbon neutral. They're saying 2025, 2030, because they're ahead of the game from us in terms of renewable forms of heat. And then there's a little image there about Dame Jackie presenting at the NHS Expo at the bottom there, and she sat there with Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive of NHS England, and Andy Burnham, and really hit home that collaboration is key. You know, the health emergency, the climate emergency is a health emergency, and if we all work together, there's massive co-benefits from us in society. And then I'll leave you there with the Cathedral Thinking quote that I touched on before. So this was the last slide in the board presentation that I did. Give all the impassioned speech about why we need to do these things and how we might get there. And then, to be honest, it's going to take a bit of cathedral thinking for us to get there, but it shouldn't stop us from acting, and it shouldn't stop us from making that commitment, because it's the right thing to do. And still got 5 minutes, but I can't hear any of you. So hopefully you heard all of that and you saw all of that. My details are there. Please feel free to reach out if you want more information. Happy to share these slides and the board papers and things
James,
that
that's
I've
fantastic.
touched on. Oh, I can hear you.
Can you hear us? That's amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so much. We
right.
are here and we are listening in, and there are people in the room, just to reassure you that actually wasn't all wasted. I think
Ah, good. That's reassuring, because I've just spent 20 minutes talking to myself. Good.